Welcome to Veterans Voice, and we have a special guest with us today, Ruth Wooten, and she's involved with the quilts that they make for veterans. They call it Quilts of Valor? Is that what they call it?
Yes, sir.
Now, could you tell us something about the organization? You know, it's a nationwide organization, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's not only nationwide now, but it's also in other countries.
Oh, in other countries too?
In other countries also. It's expanded through word of mouth, through the internet, social media.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's well known. You mentioned something earlier to me about the quilt show and here in town and everything. Of course, that's already happened.
Correct.
But they had some on display, I guess, there too, didn't they?
Yes. When we have the National Quilt Show in April in Paducah, Kentucky, we had a big display of the Quilts of Valor, and a team came from Quilts of Valor and presented quilts then. And I've heard since then they've had another award ceremony in Paducah. So it is very popular.
How many women are involved in that? Are there any men involved in quilts?
Actually, I wonder if there are men who make quilts, but I'm certain there are, because lots of men make beautiful quilts, and I can't imagine that there aren't. I tried to see if I could find out how many quilters they actually have. I don't think they know. There's thousands of women all over the country. Some like me who are just individuals. I am a member of the Quilts of Valor Foundation, but I work by myself. Others have quilting guilds. You know, there's quilting guilds in Paducah. People who have quilt shops, they make them and they donate them. So it's kind of hard to get really an accurate count of all the people that are really involved, other than what are part of the foundation itself. Now,
when did the Quilts of Valor get started? Do you know any history on it?
Yes, I do. They were founded in 2003 by Catherine Roberts. Her son was he wasn't a veteran, he was a soldier in Iraq. So in 2003, when he was in the service, she said she had a dream. And if you want, I can share the dream, and that's how the foundation began. I'd rather quote her so I don't say it wrong on her dream. She said the dream was vivid, real as real life. She saw a young man sitting on the side of his bed. I've told this story, but I'm sorry, it's really dear to my heart, and I can't hardly tell it and not cry.
That's okay.
But he sat on the side of his bed in the night, and he was all hunched over, and she could see and feel that he was being tormented by these war demons. And it was like a movie, and she was like in another scene, and all of a sudden she saw the young man covered in a quilt, and he was calm and peaceful, and all the despair was gone. And the quilt was what had made that dramatic change in his life. And she knew from that dream that the quilts represented healing, and she felt like that's what she had to do, was make quilts for these veterans as a way of healing from the war demons that they had faced.
Wow. What a great dream.
Yes, it was.
And that's the lady that got this thing to going.
She was the founder of Quilts of Valor.
Quilts of Valor. And it's the mission of the Quilts of Valor Foundation is to cover service members and veterans touched by war with comforting and healing. That's the main object of it, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It didn't start out that way, but that was how their mission statement had begun, and they went through several changes, but that was their final draft, was to touch all who were touched by war, you know, to award these quilts to all those who had been touched by war.
I know our organization here locally, the Vietnam Veterans of America, I know that your husband is a member, and I've seen we have our Christmas meeting at the local restaurant, and I've seen the quilts being presented to some of the veterans there. I brought mine. It's on the table there. I didn't know if anybody wanted to see it or not, but I'm very fond of it, and I've seen the veterans, you know, when they get awarded that quilt, you know, it kind of has a spiritual, emotional thing to it, doesn't it?
Absolutely does. You know, like I shared with you all at Christmas time when we had our VVA meeting, and I awarded 3 quilts at that time. Lots of our veterans have scars, visible scars that we can see, but lots of them have invisible scars,
that
nobody can see, and they call it a foundation, but for me it's a ministry.
Yeah.
You know, God laid it on my heart. You had asked me when I started doing this, and it was in 2016. I was recovering from chemo from breast cancer, and I went to the quilt shop, and I love to give, and I love to do, and I love to help. And I saw the Quilt of Valor and had inquired about it, and I thought, I want to do that. So I had asked that year for some ladies in the church if they wanted to make one while I was making one, and that year they did. I had 3 ladies make a quilt and have those awarded, and then I made one. And of course, with my husband being a Vietnam veteran, he got the first quilt that I had made.
Wow.
You know, and it was presented to them. After that, I just started making the quilts each year and awarding them and doing that. Just, that's my way of giving back to the veterans who gave everything they had, risked their lives, gave up everything they love to defend our country. Somebody, they don't know me. I don't know many of them, but yet they sacrificed so that I could have the freedom and the peace. And this is a way to bring healing for them.
Yeah, that's great. You know, a lot of people don't understand a lot of things that the veterans go through, and when they come home, especially with the Vietnam veterans, the reception they got when they came home, you know, kind of threw us back in the dark. You know, we didn't really socialize too much, and we didn't want to be around some people, and so but it kind of brings them out. You know, I've seen them presented to some of the veterans, and it kind of brings them out of their shell, don't it?
Yes, it does. I mean, with tears, they always say thank you. I mean, so many of y'all have told me, no one has ever told me thank you in 40 years for my service, because I deal mostly with the Vietnam veterans, you know. And so I count it a privilege and an honor to be able to do it. But of course, these quilts are for any service, branch of the service, any veterans. And as a matter of fact, they branched out. Even finally, it evolved to the point that it got to where some civilians were awarded these Quilts of Valor.
Really?
She had heard a story that was going on at the Air Force mortuary, and a man there, a lieutenant or something, had wrote an essay, and he named it "Taking Chase Home."
Oh, yeah.
And he wrote that essay about taking that young man home for burial.
They made a movie of that.
Oh, did they? I wasn't aware of that. But took them through the step-by-step process, and when Catherine, the founder, had heard about that, she gathered a team, and they gathered up quilts that people had donated and made, and they were going to present these to all these people who worked in that mortuary. Well, at the last minute, she got a call from the chaplain. He said, "I'm sorry, this isn't going to work. We've got civilians." And she made that decision right then. She said, yes, they're all getting these Quilts of Valor. They've all been touched by war, and there's no way we can, you know, not allow them to have it. They work as a team and as a family.
That's right.
And that really touched my heart. I thought that was really special. So it went from at the beginning where she was just doing it because of her son, Iraq and Afghanistan, to where through the VA Medical Center, the people started complaining and saying, now wait a minute, this isn't fair for you just to say people from Iraq and Afghanistan. Well, she didn't agree with that, you know, because she was only touched by that.
I see.
But as it grew and she began to hear, you know, other stories, what happened was they had planned an award ceremony at the Vietnam Traveling War, and I thought that was kind of funny because we all know that's going to be mostly Vietnam veterans, and they were going to award them to the Afghanistan and Iraq veterans.
Yeah,
well,
it seems kind of odd.
There wasn't any there.
Wow.
So she began handing them out to these Vietnam veterans who were doing the motorcycle, what do they call it, a guard tribute, where they ride the motorcycles past the traveling wall.
Yeah.
And so many of them with tears in their eyes said, after 40 years, this is the first time anybody said thank you.
Yeah.
And after that, she said, fine, no questions asked. We're just giving them to whoever, you know, has been touched by war.
That's great.
You know, that we feel led to give them to.
Yeah. How does one qualify for a Quilt of Valor?
A Quilt of Valor. Anybody can go to the Quilt of Valor website. It's quiltofvalor.org. And you can go through there and you can request a quilt to be awarded to somebody that you know has been touched by war, whether it's your family, a friend, whoever, anybody. You just go on there and you sign up, you put their information in there, and you submit that form, and then somebody will contact you and let you know when they have a quilt available that's been brought to them, and then they will have an award ceremony. They'll set it up specifically. Yes.
So how many organizations have you been to besides the Vietnam veterans? Have you done any Quilts of Valor presentations, awards in any of the other organizations like American Legion and things like that?
No, I haven't. It's just one of me. And,
okay.
It's
but
not
are there other ladies in the church? You mentioned ladies in your church. They're helping with it, I guess?
The first year, I had 3 ladies made a quilt, and I presented 5 quilts that year. So that year, that was my first year. I did 2, and they did 3. But after that, I've just worked alone. It's hard. People don't have time, and it's expensive. They say the average cost is $300 to make a quilt. That's not being paid to do it. That's just buying the materials and making it.
So you absorbed that cost?
I absorbed that cost. And, this, like I said, is my 4th year. And a couple times I've had individuals to hand me cash to help pay for the fabric. And the ladies at the quilt shop, occasionally, somebody that knows me, and they'll help me pick out fabrics and stuff. Occasionally they'll pitch in a little bit of money and say, well, you pay for this and I'll pay for that part, But like gills and things like that, sometimes they have quilt shops that'll donate fabric, but it's all voluntary. These people aren't being paid. The quilters aren't being paid. Nobody's giving you money for the fabric, normally, unless somebody comes along and donates it. So it's out of volunteering, it's out of love and appreciation and a desire for the people of this country to give back to our men and women who've done so much for us to protect our lives and to protect our country. Right. So, the Vietnam veterans have a special place, of course. Of course. And I know for years they hid it, they wouldn't talk about it. Yeah. But now we want, I wasn't aware of it. I grew up laying in the floor watching those names scroll night after night of the young men who died. And so the country's trying to give back to the Vietnam veterans, but not just them, all of them. They're all worthy. It's just that I don't come in contact with these other organizations. It's not that I wouldn't or couldn't. I just do as much as I've got time to do.
Well, that's great. So the quilt requirements, what's that referring to?
Okay, the quilt requirements, she didn't want it to be a charity quilt. You all gave us your best, you veterans, and we want to give our best. So you have to use top quality fabric. It can't be a tied quilt. A lot of times people will take 3 fabrics and they'll just tie here and there. And that anybody can do that. They had to be sewn quilted, either hand or machine quilted, and they have to be a certain size. It's not a bed quilt. It's a quilt for veterans to lay down in their recliner and cover up and receive healing and comfort for this. So you don't want it too big. A lot of veterans are in wheelchairs, or it could get caught in their chairs and things. So so you can go to the website if you're interested in making the quilts. You can see the requirements. It has to be no smaller than a certain size, no larger than a certain size. I don't remember the exact dimensions, but you can go and look it up. And then if you're not a quilter, some people just make the quilt tops and they send them off, and the foundation has a list on the website. So if you can just make tops and you don't know how to quilt, or you don't have a quilt machine, you just go on there and you request someone to do it, and you mail it to them and they'll quilt it, and then they'll send it to a designation. So Quilts of Valor Foundation is a team, and it's grown, so you've got somebody who makes them, somebody who makes sure they get quilted, and somebody who makes sure they get to the right destinations for a team to present them.
Now there's other quilt organizations around, but I'm sure that the Quilts of Valor is a well-deserving organization. If anybody wanted to donate to help there.
That's right. You can donate your labor, you can donate money, and you can donate the fabric. So you can go on there and see where to send it, or
Well, maybe some fabric store owners are watching right now.
Yes, and it would be great if they'd be willing to donate. And most fabric stores, when I tell them I'm making a Quilt of Valor, they will give me a discount. Well, great. And I appreciate that.
And how many quilt patterns did you say earlier? I think something about the quilt patterns.
Okay, the quilt patterns, you can buy quilt patterns. You can go on the Quilt of Valor Foundation website, and they can have patterns on there. Most of the time I go just look until I find. I mean, there's so much involved. I mean, I go and go and go and look till I find something I go, wow, because I want them to feel special. And so that's what you do. You search till you find that pattern. You go, wow, that's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah.
Somebody else is going to love it.
Now, mine's sitting right there on that
Yes.
little table. I notice it's got a lot of stars in it, and it's got the colors of red and blue and white, which
Correct.
is kind of the flag, the colors of our flag. So
Right. We try to make them patriotic.
Yeah.
You can make them anything you want, but it's a very small percentage of veterans who will pick them that not patriotic looking.
Yeah.
So I try to stick with the patriotic. Yes.
Well, that's great. So you talked about the history, the lady that founded it.
Right.
When did you say that was?
That was in 2003 when she founded it.
2003. Okay. And she's the one that had the dream
Right.
of the veteran and the quilt, giving him comfort. So
And healing.
and healing. So, is there anything that you'd like to add? Some of your personal stories?
Well, another thing about the quilts is they're 3 pieces, and I had
3
read an
pieces.
essay. Right, you got your top, and it's, as you can see, many colors, many pieces, and it's all put together. And they like to look at that like that represents the foundation, all the people, all the team workers, all the individuals, from people who sew it and people who quilt it, and they're all put together, and that creates the top. And then the center is cotton. That's what keeps you warm, and that represents the warmth that it brings to the recipient. And then the bottom part, your backing, is a solid piece, and that represents the strength. It's what gives strength to those other 2 layers, and it's a type of representing the recipients, as you've been a recipient in one, and the strength that you receive from your friends and your family and from us. And then these 3 layers are tied together by stitching. And each one of those stitches represent the love and the appreciation that we have for the veterans and the people touched by war. And a lot of these quilts are put together not only with all these stitches and all these fabrics, but they're put together with many tears and much love.
Yeah.
I know my quilts are prayed over. I would love to put scriptures on the back of them, but we're not allowed to. You know, it being a foundation, I guess. Whatever reason, but they can't stop me from praying over these quilts, and there's much prayer goes into these quilts for these veterans.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a really a deep conviction of yours.
It is. It really, really is. It's really dear to my heart, for and I believe that's just something God put in my heart.
Yeah.
You know, I want to be a blessing. I want to see these people healed. I want their inside wounds to be healed.
Yeah.
And God's the one that does that. But this is a vehicle for which that's done. You know, I saw a commercial the other day, and it was, I guess, a fire truck or whatever. And these people were sitting outside, and what did they do? The very first thing, when you see a car wreck, you see an ambulance, you see a fire, they go grab blankets, and they wrap those blankets around you. And I thought, that's exactly what, you know, this foundation we're taking. Why? Because it brings comfort, it brings healing, it makes you know that you're loved and you're cared about. It brings warmth, you know. And so I thought that was a good parallel.
Yeah, I imagine you've dealt with many of the spouses of the veterans.
Yes.
You know, and you know some of their personal experiences and feelings. Any of those that you would like to share too?
Well, I guess my husband, you know, when he was in Vietnam, they called him Woot.
Yeah, Woot.
And so when I made that quilt, he had no idea I was making it for him. And so when I awarded it to him, because I felt like it was proper to let him have the first quilt, it really touched my heart, because it touched his heart so much, because he loved that they called him Woot, you know. And he's one of those that, you know, I've lived with him 38 years, and I've seen the tears and the heartache and the grief that people go through war, come home with and live with day in and day out. And, you know, it's just a small thing, but it really means a lot to him, and I know it means a lot to all the veterans who receive these. And they're awards, they're not quilts of charity, they're awards.
Yeah, they're awards.
Because you deserve it, you did something to deserve, to be appreciated and honored for.
That's great. Is there anything else? I know you brought in a lot of notes.
I did, because I'm very forgetful since I've been through chemo, but I think that's pretty well, I think we pretty well covered it all. You know, anybody can donate a quilt, anybody, any organization, and anybody can donate the supplies. And if anybody's interested in doing these and getting involved, I would like to encourage them to go to their website and look at the information.
there's a lot of videos that are available online about the Quilts of Valor, too.
Oh, yes. So many quilting TV shows. You can go on there, and they'll occasionally have a Quilt of Valor, and then once they're done, show you how. You can go on there and download their free patterns.
Yeah.
And they've even done a book.
Also, you can download patterns.
Yes.
So
you can
those that are
download your
looking for the
patterns
right type
free.
of patterns.
Right.
Yeah.
And then just go out and shop and find some pretty fabric and get to work.
Oh, that's great. You know, my mother used to make quilts, and she'd save every rag.
Yeah.
You know.
Yes, because they didn't have all these fabric stores, and people were poor.
Yeah.
So they did.
The quilts have been around a long time. You know.
Yes, they are.
I don't know who made the first quilt, but I imagine it's well over several hundred years ago. I imagine they started putting them together. But the Quilts of Valor is a very moving organization, as far as obviously the dream that this lady had was more than just a dream.
Right. She put it into action.
She put it into action.
Yes, she figured out she had to have a team, somebody to do the tops, somebody to do the quilting, so they set out doing that, and then like I shared, then it wound up growing to having to have a team who could arrange and send these quilts out to a quilter to get them quilted, and then once they were quilted, then they needed somebody to make sure they got to their destination. And with social media, it just grew and grew to where now we've stretched out to other countries.
That's great. You know, I've had a few veterans here interviewing on the show, and many times their families will tell me thank you for helping them, their husband or their loved one, to come out of that shell a little bit.
Yes.
You know, and share some things.
Yes.
Because, you know, they go through, you know, the wives, my wife asked me, you know, several times, says, what am I doing wrong? And I said, well, for one thing, you married me, and you married a preacher. And I said, you're paying for it.
Right.
She says, oh, I've paid for it, all right. You know, so I imagine the wives of many of the veterans have been under a lot of load of stress, and they see what their husband's going through. And of course, there were some women in Vietnam too. You know?
Yes, there was, nurses and other things.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so have you ever presented a woman with a...
Not yet. I keep waiting for that day.
Well.
So I guess I just need to specifically make one, and of course I can go on their website and I can find somebody, but I prefer to do it to somebody, you know, in my circle of influence that I can reach out and touch.
Yeah, well, you know, it's a great organization. I think they are helping a lot of veterans, and it's amazing, you know, wherever I go. I mean, 10 years ago, and in fact probably only 5 or 6 years ago maybe, you wouldn't get the kind of greeting that we're getting now. And it seems like everywhere I go they say thank you for your service
and welcome home,
and welcome home. And many businesses will give you a veteran's discount if you ask. Some of them have got a little sticker on their drive-up window or something. You know, we support veterans, we give veterans a discount.
And I believe that's helping with the healing. Like you said, it's helping to pull them and draw them out of that shell, because like you said, living with a veteran, you get home and they just close up in that little shell because they feel alone and forgotten about, unloved, uncared, unappreciated.
Now you know, not to change the subject because it is kind of the same subject, but the founders of Lowe's and the founders of Home Depot, they were both World War II veterans.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I don't know about Home Depot, but I know Lowe's, they've got particular spots reserved for veterans. They have to sign
they do.
Now. They started that, I don't know, maybe a year ago. But
and on holidays, they will take one space and decorate it. And I went in there and I told him, I said, thank you, I appreciate that. My husband's a veteran and it means a lot to him. You know, and she's like, wow. You know, most people don't even say thank you. You know? So
the attitude, the visual observance of a lot of people, they realizing, you know, that they owe something to the veteran. You know, it's not that we demand it or anything like that. You know,
you deserve it.
But you know, it's a great feeling. You know, when someone says thank you for your service.
Right.
And I say that to police officers I see,
right.
you know, and firemen, you know, thank you for your service, you know,
right.
because they're all volunteers and dedicated. You know, I know some of them get a paycheck, some of them don't.
Right.
But many of them are underpaid.
Right. You know, that's icing on the cake. I mean, you see them sitting in a restaurant eating, you go up to the cashier and you pay for their meal and you walk out.
There you go.
Know.
Yeah.
And when they go to pay, they find out, hey, somebody thought about me and appreciated
somebody thought
me.
About it. I had that happened to me in one restaurant, and I asked the waitress. I said, "Where's my ticket?" And we were ready to go. She said, "Oh, it's already paid for." I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Well," and later on, before we got ready to leave, one of the veterans came over to me, and I knew him, and he said, "I got you." You know, so I said, "Well, thank you." So you know, even veterans, you know, help veterans, and I help them every chance I get. You know, so we're glad to have you on the show today.
Well, I appreciate you having me.
I hope that you'll get a lot of people requesting information, and you stirred up some people that are probably just not doing all they could do.
Right.
You know, for the veterans, the Quilts of Valor, and are there other organizations like this, or is this pretty much?
You know, I really don't know. I'm sure there
I've not heard of
but
any
this
other.
is just one that touched my heart and caught my eye, and that's what I went with. I have done stuff for other organizations that help veterans at one time when I was teaching at our Christian school. Once a month we bake cookies and we send them to the men out, you know. I don't even remember what the organization was. That's probably been 10 years ago. But I'm at home now, not working, and I love to sew, and I can't think of a better way to show my appreciation.
So they can get involved, and we'll have your information on the screen. I hope that people can contact you if they want to, and you're in your area. You're in the Ledbetter area or Smithland area? Smithland area.
Right.
So
Paducah area.
Yeah.
People know where Paducah is. They don't know where Smithland is. Yeah.
So, and they could contact you and find out how more they can get involved and what they could do.
Right.
You know, to help out. So
they want to get together and sew. It's always more fun to sew with others.
Yeah, so you have a bunch of so-and-sos get together.
Right, a bunch of so-and-sos. That'd be a good name for a group.
There you go. All right.
Thank you, Ronnie.
We're going to finish it up here, and thank you for coming today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for watching Veterans Voice.